Welcome to the ArtsFairfax FY23 Operating Support Grant Information Session. The following corrections were made after the live webinar for clarity, accuracy, and consistency with the FY23 Operating Support Grant Guidelines. For an updated copy of the presentation, please visit the ArtsFairfax website. ArtsFairfax is the county's designated local arts agency. We are nearing completion of our 2022 through 2026 strategic planning with key areas of focus in line with the county's new strategic plan, as well as One Fairfax. Operating support grants are funded in total by Fairfax County.
We have about $500,000 annually that the county distributes to us to re-grant through the grants program. And before COVID, we had 5 grant programs. In addition to the operating support, we had project support, organizational and professional development. We had a fast track grant, and we also had artist grants. Then things have been a little bit different the last couple of years. In FY21, we had operating support and emergency relief and recovery. Then last year, or this current year, we've been doing operating support and a version of the project support grant called Arts Ignite Recovery Grants. And for FY23, we are anticipating that we'll be able to offer both operating support and a project support grant as well. And, dependent upon funding, there may be additional categories. Let's go to the next slide. So the purpose of the operating support grant program is to advance the arts in Fairfax County and also to maintain the stability of the arts organizations and recognize a broad spectrum of the county's cultural organizations. Next. So, we have emphasized the importance of promoting opportunities for diverse cultural work and organizations and artists. And you'll see that reflected throughout the application. And we also hope that the grant will be a catalyst for increased resiliency. You'll hear later on that we are waiving the matching requirement again for this year, but we do still hope that the grants will help you in raising additional support for your organizations. Let's go ahead to the next. So this slide is an overview of the grant cycle for the operating support grant. And it's kind of a long process, which is basically starting with the opening of the application. It's now open on the submittable portal. Then at the deadline of the application in April, the staff will do a check of all the applications that we receive for eligibility and completeness. Then we assign the applications to the panelists for review, and we will let all the applicants know which days their applications will be reviewed so that you'll be able to listen in on your review and others if you like as well. We know that the panels are scheduled this year for May 11th through the 13th. Then after the panel review, we create a ranking, a combined ranking from all 3 of the panels, possibly even 4, depending upon the number of applications that we receive. We may do 4 days of panels as well. And we present that ranking to our grants committee. And that includes both board members as well as community members. And the grants committee makes recommendations on the funding to the full board from ArtsFairfax. And then after the board approves the grants, we will be notifying you, and that will happen. It's about like, let's see. Sorry, I cannot remember the exact date. We have the timeline further on in the application, but the board meeting, Jackie, help me out. Is it in May or June? I can't remember this year. I'm so sorry.
Believe it's in June.
Okay, we have
Mid-June.
a detailed timeline coming down. So let's go to the next slide in the meantime. Oh, I think we already did that one. Okay, so on to the eligibility. You'll notice this year that we have a new feature in Submittable, which is an eligibility quiz. So you're going to answer the questions pertaining to your eligibility before you have access to the application. And the questions are going to cover all of these criteria for eligibility that are from the grant guidelines. So first, you need to be a nonprofit arts organization with the core mission of the creation, exhibition, presentation, production, and performance in an arts discipline. You need to have regular activity in a minimum of 4 months of the year or 120 days of the year. And your organization needs to have an address of record within Fairfax County, the city of Fairfax, or the city of Falls Church. Then you also need to satisfy at least 2 of the following 4 local criteria for at least the past year. So that would be presenting at least half or more of your activities within the county, the city of Fairfax, or the city of Falls Church, meeting, rehearsing, exhibiting, or operating within Fairfax County, the city of Fairfax, or city of Falls Church, having at least half of your board of directors members live or work in the county or the city of Fairfax or the city of Falls Church. And lastly, that you verify that at least half of your participants, whether it's performances, exhibits, events, or any other activities, reside in Fairfax County, city of Fairfax, or city of Falls Church. Can go to the next. So eligible organizations also, of course, need to be in compliance with all local, state, and federal laws. If an organization does not have 501c3 status, they can apply with a fiscal sponsor. And we will work with you if you are going to be applying with fiscal sponsor. We have special instructions for both you and the fiscal sponsor, which we can send to you in advance. And the instructions are also included with the application itself. An organization needs to have independently prepared financial statements and audit. And actually, we changed the audit requirement for this year. We need to update the presentation here that it is required now for over $750,000 in expenses. An audit is required. So that has been updated for this year, and we will go over that when we talk about specific changes to the application for this year as well. All final reports need to be submitted if you received a grant from a previous fiscal year. And also we require that you upload events on a regular basis to the ArtsFairfax website calendar. Just want to take a pause here for a minute and see if anyone has any questions so far. I'm not seeing any.
Yes, I do.
Awesome.
I'm Sue from Helping Hearts Through the Arts. And it goes back to another, to the question of ranking. How do you have some guidelines and criteria for how organizations are ranked for this granting process with the grants committee?
Yes, so the panel uses the criteria criteria, which we're going to be reviewing a little bit further along in the presentation today, and they're also listed in the grant guidelines. Then at the conclusion of each panel meeting, we calculate the Z standard score for each organization. That enables us to create that combined ranking of all the different panels. And then we create different funding scenarios that are, it's basically directly correlated by the Z standard score as a percentage of the amount requested. And the funding is made available as soon as we receive the funds from the county, which typically happens in July. So we should be able to get those funds out by August. And we are going to make both the PowerPoint slides from today, posting those on our website, sending them out to you, and we will also post the recording of the presentation today.
Today, you will get, in addition to a copy of the presentation, you will receive a couple other resources that we'll discuss later. Copies of the questions that are included in the grant applications, as well as worksheet versions of the tables that are part of the applications. Those will be added to the website likely later this week.
Let's see, and there's one other question. When we report previous grants, should it be from ArtsFairfax or from others? So in terms of the eligibility that we were just going through, that would be if you have received a grant from ArtsFairfax, we would want you to be submitting your final report to us on time, as well as listing the events on our website. But in terms of the budget, we'll get to that. And we actually are offering next week a financials webinar that will talk about that in more detail. See, I think we're caught up on all the questions.
One question.
We had,
Yes.
go ahead.
I'm Doug Ralston. I'm the treasurer for Reston Players. I believe on the last slide, you talked about independently prepared financial statements.
Yes.
And I'm focusing on the word independent. Like, of course, we prepare our internal, well, I prepare our financial statements. So what would we need to do for them to be, quote, independent?
It would just need to be the treasurer's report or an audit if your budget expenses for the previously completed fiscal year are over $750,000, but otherwise a treasurer's report is adequate. And we're actually going to be going through in a lot of detail about the financials with our accountant on March 10th. If you can join us for that, that's also going to be recorded. And that slide deck will be available on the website as well, in case you're not able to join.
Excellent, thank you.
Lisa, I have one question. Jenny Strauss from Kappys. We have always submitted our 990 from the last tax year. I'm assuming that's okay. That's an independent.
Yes. So the 990 is also required, and that would be, ensuring that you're in compliance with the federal requirements for 501c3s.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Lisa, you had said that we need to get with you in advance if we're doing a fiscal sponsor.
Yes.
And so is that just to approve the fiscal sponsor and then we're able to submit the application after that through the submittal?
Yes. So we just need to, we have a form that we'll send to the fiscal sponsor. That's basically their, agreement that they will be the fiscal sponsor for you for the operating support grant.
So there's no need for an appointment or anything. It's just a matter of letting you know and then you'll send the form. Okay, thank you.
Yes, exactly.
This
Any-
is, yeah, this is Christian. I have actually two questions. One, are staff available for one-on-one discussions? And I'm asking for a first-time applicant.
Yes, absolutely. You can reach out to Jackie or myself, and we'll be happy to meet with you one-on-one anytime after the session to answer any more specific questions about your organization.
Great. And then my other question is, you had said that the 22 to 26 strategic plan wasn't adopted yet. So if we wanted to refer to an existing plan that's been adopted in terms of saying, we're furthering these goals for the county, what plans should we look at?
So our previous strategic plan for ArtsFairfax is on our website. Then the new plan will be posted as soon as it's approved by the board, which will be later this month. Then you can also refer to the Fairfax County strategic plan. Our plan is in line with the cultural and arts goals section of that plan, as well as the One Fairfax plan that is specifically for dealing with arts equity and the equity policy for the county.
Great. And so do you think we should wait until the 22 to 26 plans adopted and look through that instead of looking at the existing one?
It's an update to the plan, but I think that, if you can refer to the current one, if you want to get started, but the overall goals of the operating support grant will remain the same. So I think if you just refer to the grant guidelines here, you should be able to complete a strong application.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, Lisa, this is Tracy with Crimes of the Art. I wanted to know if I heard you correctly, that the applications are not reviewed until all of them after the deadline.
That's right.
Okay, so we can go back and forth and change things all the way up until that point.
Yes, you
Okay.
can. So even once you submit the application, we can still open it for editing. So if you make a mistake and you need to update something, then you can just request that it be opened. And anytime up until the deadline, you can still make changes to it.
Fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's go ahead and we talked about who is eligible. Now, who's not eligible would be organizations that are umbrella organizations. So if you're a division or a program that's part of a larger nonprofit 501c3 organization, you're not eligible to apply for operating support. You can only apply for project support grants from ArtsFairfax. Also, organizations that receive line item funding from Fairfax County or the state of Virginia are not eligible to apply for operating support grants. So that includes Wolf Trap and Fairfax Symphony Orchestra, and there are a couple of others. So those organizations are not eligible for grants from ArtsFairfax for the operating support. And also departments of George Mason University, nonprofit organizations and foundations that support county agencies are also not eligible to apply for ArtsFairfax grants. Any questions on the who's not eligible? Okay, let's go ahead on. So I know that there are a couple of organizations that are planning to apply with a fiscal sponsor. And we don't get a lot of these requests, but we want to encourage you and to help you to be successful with this. And we have specific instructions for that. And since it is sort of the exception, we're going to speak with you individually if you need help with that. So there are some grant restrictions, although the operating support grants are very flexible funds. They need to be used to support activities, programs, and projects that are occurring within Fairfax County, the city of Fairfax, or the city of Falls Church. You need to have qualified artistic or scholarly administrative and management staff to ensure that the activities can be completed. And the fiscal year 2023 dates are July 1, 2022 through June 30, 2023. So as you're completing the application, you'll be asked to talk about primarily focusing on the activities that you're requesting the funds to support in this grant period. And that's also what you will be completing the programs and activity table for. Let's go ahead to next. So the grants cannot be used for fundraising activities such as capital campaigns or endowment campaigns, construction or renovation projects, political advocacy, activities that are not open to the general public. So of course, if you're doing an arts education activity and it's in a school and it's not technically open to the general public, but it is, that's still an eligible activity. You cannot use the funds for debt retirement, for pre-grant costs, or any faith-based activities. As I mentioned before, the matching requirement has been waived for all FY21, 22, and 23 grants due to the pandemic. So one of the questions in the application, which also helps us to organize the applications between the multiple days of panels, is about your budget level. So there are 5 budget levels. The level 1, under 50,000 of expenses from the previously completed year, is going to use the short form as we had for last year. And then the larger budgets are going to fill out the longer form. We were able to shorten the long form further, streamlining it from last year. When you're calculating your budget, do not use in-kind expenses or any pass-through funds. And you can apply for up to 15% of your total expenses from your most recently completed fiscal year. If you are applying with a fiscal sponsor, you're going to use your own organization's budget, not your fiscal sponsor's budget when you're answering these questions.
Lisa, we do have one new question in the chat.
Oh, okay. In-kind expenses, that refers, there's a lot of detail about this, whether it's in-kind goods or in-kind services in the grant guidelines. But an example of in-kind expenses would be, say, you have a special arrangement with an organization that provides you free space for your rehearsals, or someone provides you without cost any other service like printing of your program, something like that. That would be an in-kind expense. You're not actually paying for it. The in-kind expenses would be reflected in the budget under both income as well as expense. Yes, and then the next question about the minimum award is going to be the same as last year, that the minimum grant will be $1,000.
We also have a question from Chris. Can events that receive funding charge an entry fee or collect a free will donation at the event?
Yes. explain 15% of total expenses. Okay, we're gonna go down and look at the actual financials form and show you exactly which box to use for calculating your eligible amount of your expenses. So let's hold off. I think that will be clearer when we're actually looking at the financials. Let's see. So pass-through money, there wasn't a specific question about that, but for instance, if you're selling artwork and then the funds are going right back to the individual artists, then or you're getting a percentage of that, you can only show that portion in your under the income. So pass-through is not going to be included in your overall budget eligibility calculation. Again, some good examples of that in the guidelines. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jackie, and she is going to highlight some of the key changes that we've made for FY23.
So like Lisa mentioned earlier, at the end of January, we held 7-hour+ long feedback sessions where we got feedback from recent grantees over the last, I believe, 2 fiscal years. We reached out to recent grantees and we compiled their feedback and presented it to our grants committee and came up with a series of actions that we could make for this particular grant application. So we eliminated the word count. So all the narrative questions have a suggested word range, but you are able to be under or over. We kept the range for our reviewers so that our reviewers are not burdened by extremely long answers, but you do have the option to submit a long answer if you would like. We also eliminated the partnership table, and there is now just a narrative question attached to that. We will also in the future be providing detailed panel feedback to all applicants with award letters. If you would like to receive feedback for an application from, let's say, last year's application is very similar to this year in terms of all the questions, go ahead and email me after this session and I will get that out to you within the next week or so. But yeah, you can reach out to me, same email that you received the Zoom link from. Like Lisa mentioned earlier, we are waiving the match for fiscal year 23 as well. We have also scheduled a financials webinar for March 10th. That's next Thursday. That is with our accountant, and we will be going over financial terms and also the financials table in more detail. The financials table is now embedded in the application. We'll be taking a look at that in a few minutes, as opposed to a separate worksheet, but I'm also going to provide a separate worksheet for download. We got the feedback that it would be helpful to have certain parts of the application available as like Word documents and Excel worksheets so that they can be passed around from different people in the organization to gather different information and complete different portions of the application. There's also a new feature in Submittable where you can invite someone to create an account and collaborate on the application with you. So now more than one person can collaborate, and there is even a system where you can leave messages for each other and keep track of where you are in the application, what still needs to be done. The versions the Excel versions of those tables that are included in the application, as well as Word document versions of the application, will be available on the website probably by the end of the day tomorrow. But I will send out all of them today after the presentation is over, along with a copy of this PowerPoint. just keep in mind that you still need to submit all the information through Submittable and not just using the versions of the application that can be edited on your Word processors. We still need all applications to be finalized and submitted through Submittable in order for them to be reviewed. See, we've also added the criteria into the application so that you will not need to refer to the guidelines as frequently in a separate window, and increase the audit threshold to budgets over $750,000 to match what the National Endowment for the Arts is doing. We have also reduced the number of work samples and supplemental materials required to submit, and there are now suggested numbers for those. I'm going to move on to the next slide. So following the grant application process will be, or the application deadline, April 14th, will be reviewing the applications in-house to just confirm that everyone who has submitted has met the eligibility and completeness standards. ArtsFairfax staff do not review the applications, though. All applications will be peer reviewed. The panels take place, when was that? May 11th through 13th, is that right? Incomplete applications are subject to rejection without evaluation. If an application is rejected, the applicant will be notified by email. And the panelists will be made up of arts professionals with particular knowledge or expertise in your applications and in your categories. So we do ask you to identify what category of arts organization that you fit in the application. The panel meetings will most likely be held online, but we will be making them, sorry, let me rephrase. You will be able to attend and listen in on the day that your application is being discussed. The role of ArtsFairfax staff specifically is to recruit and assign panelists, check the applications for eligibility and completeness, compile the panel scores, take notes at the panel, and provide technical assistance on the online grant portal submittable to applicants and panelists, and also during the most likely virtual review panels.
So the important thing to keep in mind here is that we do not actually participate in the review. So anything that you tell us also needs to be in the application itself, because we instruct the reviewers that the applications do need to stand on their own. Jackie, can we just pause for 1 second? Because there are a couple of questions. Does the match mean to receive a grant, an organization must have matching contributions? So previous to the pandemic, yes, the county had as a stipulation of the funding that we're regranting that there's a 2-to-1 matching requirement, but we have gone to the county and asked that we could waive that for FY21, 22, and 23. So there is no matching requirement. That's something that normally you would need to confirm, and then we would verify that at the time that you submit your final report, but that is going to be waived for an additional year. Let's see.
We have, in order to qualify for the minimum $1,000 grant, I assume you need a budget of $6,666, as 15% of that is $1,000. Is that correct, Lisa?
Technically, yes, but I would say that yes, that would be the minimum budget that that would be required. Exactly. Yes. Thank you. Because we have the universal minimum, that's correct. Would you be explaining why an application is rejected and when you reject it? So this really hardly ever happens, but An example would be if there have been a couple of instances where organizations have started to submit an application, but then they weren't able to complete their financials for, for whatever reason, in time for the deadline, or just if there were any of the required documents that they weren't able to produce, then we would reach out to you and give you a chance to upload them to the application if they were missing. But if you're not able to get those in a timely manner before the grant panel review begins, then it would not be able to be reviewed. Does that answer your question? Of course, we're also checking, the eligibility. So that's why we're asking you to submit the list of your board members with their addresses highlighted if they're in Fairfax County, in the cities, so that we can calculate to make sure, that if you're using that as a criteria, that you're meeting that requirement. We're checking the programs and activities tables to make sure that, the majority of the activities are within Fairfax County and the cities of Fairfax and City of Falls Church. We understand, that a lot of organizations are also performing at other venues regionally, but the majority of your activities need to be in the county and the cities.
Claire from Artisans United asks, last year the minimum applied to if your application was approved, even if the budget was below the amount that would yield $1,000.
Yes, that will be the same case this year. The minimum grant will be 1,000.
But does that still pertain to what we discussed earlier with the 15%? 1,000 has to be at least 15% of your budget.
So that is a really good question. And I'm going to, let me just think about that, and I will send a response back out to everyone. That is, so you're asking if your organization basically had a budget of, say, a $500 budget. I think we need to clarify that in the guidelines, that there is a minimum. And so thank you so much for that question.
So if it's okay,
Yes,
I will
there is a
return to the presentation.
Oh, there is a maximum grant amount, and it is specified in the guidelines, which I believe is $50,000.
A great question from Kristen. Do we need to differentiate that a board member lives versus works in Fairfax County, or is it enough to note that they are either living or working in Fairfax County?
So we asked for you to submit the addresses for both residents and work, and then you can highlight if they meet both the criteria or just one of them.
So ArtsFairfax determines grants, ArtsFairfax determines grant amounts by looking at the scores that were given out by the panelists and ranking them using Z-score. Z-scores are then converted into a percentage, and applicants are funded at the percentage that they met. This is approved by our grants committee and approved by the ArtsFairfax board. Calculations are then verified by an outside accountant for accuracy. Lisa, I believe you're going to talk about evaluation criteria.
Okay. So The panels are going to be composed as usual of 3 to 5 individuals from a variety of arts disciplines and arts administration backgrounds with no conflict of interest to review and evaluate each of the eligible applications. We welcome your suggestions and nominations for reviewers. We try to have all of the disciplines represented on each of the panels. And the criteria are the organization profile, the quality of the programs, the community engagement, organizational effectiveness, and the financials. And each of the 5 criteria is equally weighted. As Jackie mentioned earlier, we've put each of the criteria for the relevant sections of the application, added those into the application itself, as well as being in the grant guidelines. There are some differences between the criteria for the long and the short form. And those are noted in both places, in the guidelines and the application. Let's go ahead to next. So here they are in a lot of detail. I'm not going to read through all of these right now, but you're welcome to reach out to us if you do have any questions.
These are the same criteria that are available in both the guidelines and the application itself. We have a question from Janie about her organization. Janie says, go ahead.
So the question is, are county students attend events in both Fairfax County and other regional areas? Do the out-of-county events count for the grant requirements? You can definitely include those in your discussion of the programs and activities, but if you're using that as one of the eligibility criteria for the locality, then at least half of those activities should be within Fairfax County and the cities of Fairfax and the city of Falls Church.
Okay, thank you. So it's the geographic location because we involve kids from all over the region. Okay, thank you.
Yes, so focus on what's happening in the county and the cities, please. But of course, we want, the panelists to have a good picture of the overall reach of your program as well. So on our website, we have a lot of resources for you. The grant guidelines are there. We can just pop over actually to the operating support webpage and look at those now. So if you scroll down a little bit, great. You'll see that you can get the guidelines here. There's a sample application from last year that the panel had called out as being, particularly well done. So we got permission from that applicant to share it with you. Their online application instructions, the submittable portal is pretty user-friendly, but in case you're collaborating with anyone else from your organization, you can share these instructions with them if they're not familiar with the portal as well. Recent recipients of the grants are listed there from last year. We will be posting the presentation deck from today, as well as the recording. We have all the grant application resources. So there are links to the census, so you can get very detailed demographics about your service area. Links to the One Fairfax plan, all kinds of resources that we hope will be really helpful in completing your application, the Fairfax County Strategic Plan that we mentioned earlier. We have incorporated some of the recommendations from the Americans for the Arts Aesthetic Perspectives report into our application and guidelines. So we're providing a link to that. The Opportunity Index, a link to Title I schools, that all these arts access resources will hopefully help you when you're completing the section of the application about community engagement, as well as diversity resources. There's a really great infographic on the county's website about immigrants in the county. And then that last resource is another report that One Fairfax shared with us that we thought was really excellent resource as well. And of course, also on the site, we have a audience survey template. So that is hopefully going to help you in figuring out who is coming to your programs. And then we also have the, it's a little bit slow loading, the grantee communications kit. This is that, that template, the grantee communications kit and the branding guide, and then our logos as well. I think that's pretty much everything that's there. Also, under the resources, we're going to have uploaded, if it's not already, the Word version of the application questions and the Excel version of the financials table. So those will be also under the resources and downloads section.
Our designer is working on it right now. I expect it to be up either by the end of the day today or end of the day tomorrow. But you will receive them by email today.
Thank you. Jackie, you want me to keep going on with this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So this is a graphic of the distribution of arts organizations in Fairfax County in the cities of Fairfax and the city of Falls Church. And it's just one way that you can also, this is included a link to this in that grant resources that we were looking at earlier, but this is just one way that you could look at how you're engaging with underserved districts, because you can see that there are very few organizations, arts organizations in Lee, Mount Vernon, and Springfield districts. So highlighting any programming that you're doing in those districts, or if you yourself are an arts organization that's based in one of those districts, that would definitely be something to call out in the application.
This is the same as the website or webpage that we just looked over, so I'm going to move on. So I can take it from here. So strong applications will include these characteristics, among others. Organizations that design programs to meet unique needs of their interests, needs and interests of their community. Organizations that demonstrate the use of demographics to support program design and community outreach. Organizations that share details on strategic priorities. A budget that includes a diverse revenue streams, and that is balanced with a variety of unearned and earned sources, as well as a board giving policy. We will go in more detail with that at next week's budget seminar. Organizations that use their budget narrative to illuminate the connections between the budget and the organization's goals. As far as Sorry, let me continue to the next slide. The panel comments also reflect how well the proposal showcases the quality of programs, organizational effectiveness, and community outreach. They also underscore the weaknesses in applications. Weaknesses include a lack of awareness in the community, and an inability to differentiate yourself as an organization with clear organizational objectives, and an organization that doesn't look at diversity as a, sorry, I actually have a different piece to discuss about diversity, but diversity should be included in board leadership, artists, and audiences. As far as your, sorry, I'm going to rephrase this. We do recognize that every organization is at a different place with this. Some have just started addressing this issue. Others are further along in the spectrum. The key point for us in the panel is to see where the organization is on the spectrum and what steps we have taken, intentional planning for the organization and for the future, and how your community and constituents inform your mission, your programs, and your services. We want to know what excites you about diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, and what challenges and opportunities you face with diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. And you can also think of DEIA as a broad and holistic term, and think about diversity in a number of different ways.
Jackie, before you go on, there's a couple questions in the chat.
Starting with John. For an arts organization, how do you handle community engagement?
For an arts education organization?
Yes, arts education organization.
Do you want me to answer that?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So as you know, a lot of the arts education organizations are also providing public venues for, so like, for instance, for your organization, how are you, engaging the community in the public performances that they're holding, and informing the community about opportunities to participate in the arts education program.
Our next question goes, this season we're presenting our concerts in mixed either forms. One was online only, two will be hybrid, and one will be live only. When we list audience attendance, I'm assuming that we can include both live and online viewing. Yes, definitely. And can you expand on the use of demographics to drive your programming? So would you like to discuss that?
Yeah, so understanding, who's coming, who's not, how does, an understanding of who is participating drive, what your artistic choices are in terms of your programming. That's what we mean using those demographics. Who are you reaching out to engage with, to expand your audience as well? Okay, so Jackie, do you want to keep going with the terms and conditions?
Sure.
A question on terms and conditions?
Yes.
What does mandatory participation in research mean?
Oh, that's, we have a number of different ways that we're collecting information about the arts in the community. So one really important one that's coming up is the Americans for the Arts, Arts and Economic Prosperity Index. So staff from ArtsFairfax will be reaching out to all the arts organizations for your help in collecting information for this. It basically, is used for advocacy purposes. And we're collecting all of this information for the county, as well as I believe we're going to be including the cities this year again as well. And then we share that out to you so that you can use it as well when you're advocating for funding and other needs. So that's just one example of participation in research, but we really need your help in order to give the full picture of the arts impact in our community.
We would do that regardless.
Thank you. You'd be surprised though. Sometimes it's hard to get, to get people to respond to the surveys. And so we have included that as a requirement of the grant.
So for terms and conditions, this is an overview of a more detailed segment of the grant guidelines, and the terms and conditions are also included in the grant application. When you submit, you will have to check a box that says you agree to the terms and conditions. This has to do with the duration of the grant, the months that the funding applies to, your eligibility, the award minimum and maximum amounts, the use of funds, and an important one that we want to remind everyone of is the acknowledgement of ArtsFairfax funding. We require that for especially performing arts organizations that you acknowledge ArtsFairfax funding in your programs, and we can provide graphics to be placed on physical or digital programs. Just reach out to my email or our communications manager, Manuela. We also require that you list events and programs on the ArtsFairfax website. We are hoping eventually that ArtsFairfax will be a single destination where people can visit and see what is happening in the county, and we need to make sure that our community events and our grantees are posting all of their events.
And we have a Google grant. So as you might have heard, we're working with organizations who are listing their events in the calendar to help provide additional promotion and search engine optimization through that Google grant. So if we don't know that it's happening, then it makes it really difficult for us to try to help to support you and to drive audiences to your programs and participants to your activities.
I just want to address a question left in the chat. You can find our updated guidelines on our website under the operating support grants page. I will pull up the window again. This is the link. It's artsfairfax.org/operating support grants. And this box here, operating support grant guidelines, right on the left side of the page will have a document available to read. We can also include a PDF of this, I believe, on our resource pages, if this is something that you would like to download and print. But the entire document is updated and available on the website now.
Yeah, this is Chris Shaheen. I'm just on your website now, and I didn't think I was this technology unsavvy, but when I go to grants, I don't see anything on the supporting grants.
Are you clicking, when you go to the grants page, are you looking at the drop-down menu and choosing operating support grant?
Yeah, it doesn't even show up.
Okay, we will talk later. Definitely email me
Oh.
after the presentation
Well,
And
this
I
time
will,
it did, but I swear it didn't
Okay.
show up before, but now I got
that's
it.
okay. It's
But
not,
any other
this isn't the
questions, we
first
can,
time. This
any other
isn't the
time,
first time we've
if I have other
doing
questions,
this.
we'll talk later. I don't want to take up people's time.
That's okay. Yeah, we'll talk later about it. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know that. So for the rest of the terms and conditions, you can check out the guidelines on our website for more detail. Lisa, could you discuss the addendum?
Absolutely. So we do have a required addendum form that is available after you submit your actual application, right up until about the week before the actual panel meetings. And Jackie will be sending this out to you through a direct link. It's just a really short form. It's your opportunity to say if there has been any major change in your organization from the time that you submitted the application until the panel review. It could be you have a new chair of the board, or you received a grant that you got your funding from the VCA, anything like that. Major grant, anything, major changes. And you can upload information there. So that is your opportunity to give a short update to both us as well as the grant panel. And that becomes part of your application in the same way you'll see as the eligibility form, which actually the eligibility form is going to be blind. The grant panelists don't need to see that because we only share with them access to the applications that are eligible for review, but they will be able to see this addendum as part of your application. John, we can provide a PDF of the guidelines as well. Thank you. We talked a little bit about acknowledgement of the ArtsFairfax funding. I think, Jackie, you covered that really well already. And there's more detailed information in the grant communications kit. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us. Jackie can provide those grant announcements for your programs if you need them. And if you need help with updating your directory listing or any issues with uploading events, the contact for that would be Manuela.
So I want to mention a change with the required documents that we'll see when we go over the application itself. This is something to look out for when you're filling it out. We have embedded the relevant documents that need to be uploaded into the sections that relate to the materials and the attachments. And this is to help our reviewers make sure they don't miss anything that you submit to them. We don't want to hear that they didn't see a cover sheet or missed a link or missed a work sample during the panel. We want to avoid that issue, but it does mean that they're sectioned out, but they are not consolidated at the end of the application. So there is a required documents checklist at the end of the application to make sure that you submit everything. And we do want you to check every box that applies to you and applies to the required documents at the end of the application before submitting. Make sure that you have everything there. Lisa, you can take this one.
Okay, so hopefully this will not need to come into play, but we do have a appeals process. If you believe that your application was not funded at level or was for some reason denied based upon criteria other than the 5 that are in the grant guidelines, then you can submit a appeal to us in writing within 2 weeks of your notification of the grant award. And there's very detailed instructions in the grant guidelines as well. Let's go ahead to next. We've just included here a couple of tips, just, you know, in general for grant writing. We recommend that you do create the narrative responses in like a Word document or, you know, Google Docs, and then copy and paste it into the application. Don't use jargon. Try to, you know, spell out all of the acronyms, so to make sure that the panel will understand what you're referring to. Keep in mind that the reviewers who are reading your application may not know your organization or your program, so you want to make sure that it's clear to somebody who isn't familiar with you. And also a reminder that ArtsFairfax staff does not participate in the panel review itself. We always also recommend that you have someone who hasn't been working on the application proofread it. It could be, you know, maybe a board member or another staff member before you're submitting it, just to catch any spelling or grammar errors. That, of course, is not one of the criteria. It doesn't count against you, but definitely a recommendation. So by the time the reviewer is finished reading your application, the goal is for them to know your organization and understand your activities. Another tip is to make sure that any financial information that you refer to in the narrative also matches the financial form. And if you need any help or have any questions, Jackie and I are here to assist you, so please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Here are the dates. So the application deadline is April 14th. The panel meetings are May 11th. The grants will be announced in August, and you will receive 70% of the grant at that time. Then final reports are due, and that should be August 1st, 2023, that the final report is due. Sorry about that typo. And at the time that the final report is reviewed and approved, then you receive the final 30% of the grant payment. But August 1st, 2022 is the due date for your FY22 operating support grant final reports. Anyone who is a previous grant recipient.
I fixed that typo.
Thank you. Okay, so now is the time when we are gonna go ahead over to the actual application. We're thinking about using the, or planning to use the long form since it's more comprehensive than the short form. So just wanted to get sort of a read, like we've been going now for, oh my goodness, for about an hour and 15 minutes. So is everyone okay if we just go straight through so that we can get through all of your questions that are specific to the application itself by 1:30? We wanted to be able to have a short break, but I think we're okay. We're going to power through. Thank you. Oh, and Alex, you've got your hand up. What's your question?
Nope, sorry, I hit the wrong button. I was trying to give
Oh,
thumbs
okay.
up.
Okay, thank you.
So this page will update soon. The registration buttons will be removed and replaced with an application button. But I do want to point out that the button to register for the grants financial webinar is listed here. And you can also find more information about that on our calendar. Let me start by going to the application page. You can click this link that says apply here, but I actually already have it open. 1 second. There we go. This is what you'll see at artsfairfax.submittable.com/submit. There are general guidelines above here. And to answer the question that was just placed in the chat, short form or long form is not a choice. You go based on your budget. So long form is for organizations that have a budget higher than $50,000, and short form is under $50,000. I'm going to go with the long form because it is more comprehensive. The difference is most of the narrative questions are not included in the short form. The we are doing it differently than BCA, which has a different review process as well. So this is the one that suits our review process.
We're definitely going to look into the short form for larger budget organizations, but for this year, we need to collect more information. You know, given everything that's been happening during the pandemic, we felt like this was not the right time to go to that short form, but we will definitely be looking into that for next year as an option for you.
So the primary differences between the short form and the long form are that the long form has, I believe, 17 narrative questions. One of them is optional, and the short form has 9. One of them is optional. And of those, one of the short form is not included on the long form. It's just more comprehensive to cover what we need to cover in the short form. The other difference is that the criteria is slightly different. You'll see in the guidelines that in the criteria section, some of the criteria have an asterisk next to them, and those denote the criteria that apply just to the short form, but all of the criteria listed in the guidelines apply to the long form. A new feature this year is that the eligibility quiz is a separate form that is filled out before you can even enter the application. I'm going to go ahead and fill this out so that I can view the application now, but I wanted to show that the first thing you see is the eligibility form. So give me 1 second. This first question is just to stop you from filling out the wrong application. If you realize you clicked the wrong one, there's a link to return back to the other page right here. And 1 second, just gonna fill this out. This last question here, please answer it honestly. It's asking about listing events and programs on our calendar. That is something that's a requirement in the previous year's operating support grant guidelines. And this is just information that we want to emphasize and gather to make sure that our grantees are following this specific requirement. But no matter what you choose, all of these will make you eligible to apply for the application as long as the other questions mean you're eligible. So please answer this one honestly so we can gather that information. So here at the top, we're going to start with an eligibility section. we have a few documents that are required just to verify your eligibility. There's also a question about applying with a fiscal sponsor. If you choose yes, it will expand with instructions. We also ask that you contact me and let me know who your fiscal sponsor will be so that we can get you started on your specific additional instructions and processes that need to be completed. So I'm going to proceed with a no there and move on. We're going to ask basic information about your application or about your organization. This organization name is the application name, the project name, and how we're going to search your application and identify you. So make sure that this is accurate. We're asking for your address, social media, website information, if you have it, grant contacts, chief administrator contacts, chief or board chair contacts, and here an annual number of performances, exhibitions, annual events, and total audience. Please fill out what applies. We're also asking about your staff, both volunteer and paid full-time and part-time. Depending on how you answer, additional questions will appear just as they did last year.
And that also helps us with dividing the applications between the panels. We use a combination of the budget size as well as the staffing.
Only relevant information will be shown to the panelists too that affect their review. So some of these questions are concealed and will not impact the review at all. You also have the option this year to identify a secondary category of arts organization. So if you do instrumental music and arts education, that is something that you can identify here. We're also asking about your application status, your budget. There's a budget verification question here, and below that, the amount requested. This is when I'm talking about how we're embedding the required documents into the relevant sections. So this is an extension of that first section, the applicant information section, where you can upload your 990 and your bios for board and staff members. This is an optional upload for long form only. This one isn't included on the short form. We're asking for your organization's mission, your history, your geographic service area, and this is the appearance of the narrative questions now. The word count has been omitted, and now there is a word count range. These were determined based on past applications and how many words we think that you will need for this question based on those past applications. I took what the word count was and then created a range around that. So if this doesn't suit your purpose, if this isn't enough or too much for your answer for the question, that's okay. There is no fixed word count, but this is what we are recommending for each of these questions. The next section is programs and services. As you can see here, we mentioned earlier that the criteria is now included underneath each section, and the sections are broken up based on the scoreable criteria for the grant. So this is exactly what the panelists will be looking at, and now you can reference it in the application as opposed to referring back and forth between the guidelines and the application. We ask you to generally describe your programs and activities, and the programs and activities chart has made a return. A key point is to list them by category. Don't list your individual events. That you have room to do so, but please don't. We just want to know how many classes took place in this particular time frame in the last grant cycle. How many or sorry, how many are planned for the upcoming grant cycle? Sorry, excuse me. And same for workshops, camps, arts education, performances, seminars, etc. You, with the two tables, there is a Excel version that will be available to you. I will send it out today, but it'll also be available on the website. But to submit, you will need to type directly into the application itself. Someone had asked about copying and pasting information into these tables. Unfortunately, we don't have the integration for taking all of the information at once and copying them directly into the table. I'm gonna pull up, I already did. Oh no. If we have time at the end, I can pull up what the worksheet versions of the tables look like. Submittable does not support a lot of formatting or any, so the Excel versions do have some color coding and things that help make them a little bit easier to understand and follow, but ultimately you do have to bring the information back to these tables. Those worksheets are just available so that you can send them to the contacts in your organization who may need to fill them out separately from this web format. Some more narrative questions, and then here another section for attachments. This is the programs and services attachment section, right below the programs and services narrative section. We are looking for a cover sheet that lists your work samples and supplemental materials, and then those work samples and supplemental materials will be uploaded separately in their own sections below that. The next section is community engagement. These questions have resources that are available to click. They're linked here below to help you answer these questions. For the accessibility, I will pause in a second, or I'm going to pause and answer John's question. So the reason we are formatting the tables like this is to standardize the way the tables look for our reviewers. It was requested by a past reviewer that the tables all look exactly the same. Is that right, Lisa? Was there another reason we decided to go with the submittable table as opposed to the downloadable table?
There were a lot of issues with those downloadable tables. Yes, having the information as part of the application was both a response to reviewers' needs as well as some technical issues that were occurring with the downloadable files. So we kind of compromised this year, and we'll see how this goes of providing you with the Excel versions so that maybe it will be easier for your collaboration, and then copying the information over into the actual application itself. It also enables us to be able to create combined reports. And so there are a variety of reasons why we're going to try to stick with this system now that it's available through the submittable portal.
Lisa, could you address Susan's question about the magisterial district and how to list concerts in different parts of the county?
So if you're doing activities in multiple areas, I would recommend that you do list those performances out individually. so that we can capture the locations, because we're trying to, we use a lot of this information for advocacy purposes with the supervisors. And we're also using the information that we gather here to make the case that there, even though maybe the organization's address of record isn't in, say, an underserved magisterial district, like that there are activities still happening in those districts. So, for example, those that have very few or no grantees in them, when we're going to advocate with the supervisors for the budget for FY23, we can say, well, so there were no grant recipients according to, who was funded last year, but we can show them that there were activities, still grant funded activities in their districts. So thank you so much for your help with providing that information.
I'm going to jump around to the questions that have been coming in. I'm going to answer John's next. Do you want us to list activities outside of Fairfax County? You can list them with the location under the magisterial district, and that instruction line is included above the table.
And also, if you have an online activity, just put virtual or online in that column.
Sorry, 1 moment. I'm gonna make sure we're hitting everyone. Tracy, you said we are producing a movie. Would we list shot days as an in the activity chart? Reach out to me, because I think that's a special circumstance, and we want to make sure that your chart is consistent with everyone else's, but of course there's a special way to format it. So respond to my email that I send out later today, where you can see the chart in more detail, and we can work together to make sure that works for you. Let's see.
Thank you.
Laura asks, for organizations that have multiple categories of activities like performances, workshops, camps, concerts, do you prefer listing by category or in chronological order? I'm not sure.
I would say category.
Category? Oh, okay. And I'm just making sure. Didn't miss anybody. Did anyone have a question that I didn't answer yet?
I see one question. Kappys won't know the exact number of performances until September. How should we fill out the form asking for the number of events? Just do your best to estimate based upon, your previous year and what you have planned. It won't be until you submit the final report that you would be, expected to say exactly what's happening. And in that report, you show the anticipated that was in the application versus, the expected versus the actual. Yes, list your activities outside of Fairfax County. And for those, you can say, I think we have some instructions about the language there, whether it's like metropolitan region or DC, Maryland. Yes, we would like to know.
Dawn asks, for the activities table, we don't have to include a date for the event. No, because we're listing them by category, not by date. So we don't need to know the date of the event. We just need it to be within this window of July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. I'm going to move on if that's okay with everyone. We have additional narrative questions below here. And then there is a, sorry, we actually talked about this already. Below the table is where you will be able to upload your cover sheet, your work samples, and your supplemental materials. Beyond that, there is a section on community engagement. There are links available under these questions. We mentioned that earlier. And then for the section on disability, Lisa, do you want to talk about these particular questions and what you're looking for here?
So the accessibility questions, our accessibility officer, Hope Cagle, who's also our arts education manager, helped us to update these questions. And so you can just check off everything that you have, that you're doing that's available. And then talking about any other plans that you have in order to make your programming more accessible. And we do have some good resources on that from a previous accessibility workshop that are available on our website as well under resources.
Our next section is on organizational effectiveness, where we ask about staffing structure. Let me jump to that question in just a second. And diversity initiatives, as we mentioned before, we just want to know like where you are in your DEIA planning and how you're looking at demographics to inform your staff, board, volunteers, etc. This question, is your organization minority, woman, or veteran led? You can, this is an optional question, of course, because it's not going to apply to everybody, but I want to mention that this question is not going to be viewed by panelists. This is for us to pull out information that will be included. This should probably be mentioned in your narrative questions up here, your diversity in your leadership. And this is for us to pull out this information so that we can give it to the county, because the county was asking for this information in their own grants, and we want to see how our organizations compare. I'm going to move down to the financial section. This is a section that will be going into a lot of detail with our accountant next week. Make sure that your treasurers and budget staff have signed up, and they will get a chance to ask any question that they might have about these charts and questions.
We're running a little bit over. I'm so
Yes.
sorry. So I just wanted to like call special attention to the key box that that you're going to refer to, since somebody had asked about this earlier. In the first column A, the total expenses excluding additional. If you just move your cursor down a little, one more, whoops.
Yes,
Yep, there we go. That's what you're going to use to calculate the 15%, up to $50,000 that you can request.
We also have a question for you to give a narrative answer about your budget and describe things that are listed in the table. And then this last question, question 17, is a completely open-ended question. It doesn't have to pertain to budget at all. This is just the end of the application. So you can add anything that you would like the panel to know about your organization that you felt could not be covered by the questions that we asked. Finally, we have our submission section with an upload checklist and a place to sign a grant contact name, chief administrator name, and board member name, as well as a please mark your date of submission when you're ready to submit. Check the box that says I agree with terms of use. If you click this link, it will open up our terms and conditions page for our grant. Those are also available in grant guidelines. You are also able to save a draft and submit. I also want to make sure that we see the collaboration feature. Oh, here it is. Okay, I thought it was up in the corner, but it's here. You can click this link to invite collaborators, and you can add an email. This will invite them to either log in or set up an account. And there are features that Submittable has that will help you keep track of where you are and your next steps and chat within the application. So you have
But
both
each organization still uses just one organizational email for all of your applications, whether it's a grant application or if you're applying for the DEIA learning cohort or Capital One Hall, you should just use one organizational email. But this is a nice new collaboration tool. So if somebody else besides the key grant contact is completing, say, the financials form, you can share it with them. So they will have access to the application. Sorry.
We've gotten to the end of this, so I'm just going to answer the questions that are appearing in the chat. Deb says a narrative space would be helpful as we would provide more of these if requested.
So there is a narrative section for the accessibility. I think I saw that question pop up.
Yes,
there is a narrative question there. And then you can also use that open-ended question at the end to talk about anything else that you wanted to highlight for the reviewers. So we're just going to hop back over to the PowerPoint presentation quickly. I just want to call your attention to, thank you so much for hanging with us. I'm sorry that we ran over. I hope this has been really helpful. And I wanted to just make sure that you have these dates on your calendars. The financials webinar next Wednesday with Sarah Bright Yaneza, who is our accountant. She did one of these financials webinars a few years back, and it was super helpful. And that's your opportunity to ask any questions specific to that section of the application. And then we have the deadline coming up for the DEIA learning cohort application, which is March 15th. And I hope that you'll all consider applying for that. It's a fabulous opportunity to work with Dr. Bria Heidelberg, who facilitated our workshops last year. And she's also going to be providing one-on-one coaching to organizations that are in this learning cohort for improving the DEIA and any issues that they're encountering in their own organizations. So it's an opportunity to, learn from your fellow organizations as well as an expert in the field. I believe that the budget hearing is going to be April 13th, will be our date for testimony. So we will be back in touch with you once that is confirmed with the county. Then this grant is due on April 14th, is the application deadline. And if you're interested in applying for the community arts use of Capital One Hall, earlier this week, we had the information session on that. That is also posted on our website, or will be soon. And the deadline is May 1st. So again, thank you all so much for joining us here today. And we can stay online for a few more minutes if there is anything else that you'd like to ask us. And I think I just saw that Lila put in a reminder in the chat that there is the Reston Art Center community feasibility sessions. You can participate in those in person. There's also an online option coming up. There's a link in the chat. You can also provide your comments through the online option to email comments for what you'd like to see in this potential new art center in Reston, which is so exciting. So I hope and encourage everyone to participate in that as well. Thank you, everybody. And Jackie and I will stay online in case there are any other questions. And you're also free to reach out to us, you know, with any specific questions about your organization. Joanne.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hi there. How is everybody?
Good. Thank you. How are you?
Good. So this is great that we can collaborate, but explain to me how the system works. So if two people are in at the same time and you're both working on different sections, what gets saved? Is it the last person?
That's a really good question. This is a totally new tool.
Yeah.
And, you know, full disclosure, I have not tried this out myself, but I'm trusting that in, you know, that Submittable, you know, has fully released this. It's not a beta, so that you can both be in the application at the same time. It auto saves. You might have seen when Jackie was in the application that it was just like popping up every, you know, few seconds or so, auto saving. So it should be capturing all of the edits from both, but that's a really good question. And I'm just gonna, we're gonna need to clarify that for sure. And then we'll get you a response. They have a really great,
I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, the Submittable has a really great knowledge base. So it may be that we can just, you know, Google that or, you know, search that and see if somebody else has a similar question. Jackie,
So,
did you remember that from doing any of the webinars on the new features?
I don't. But I was trying to find, I found like a video earlier today that explained the collaboration feature from the administrator's point of view. So I need to find it from the applicant's point of view. I'm sure they have a web tutorial. Submittable has a ton of online resources. So I'll make sure that that is provided to anyone who needs it. And we can also put it up on our resources page on the website.
Great. Thank you very much.
And I'd also like to test it. So we'll probably get on and test it later and see what happens when we collaborate.
Thank you.
We do have a number of questions that were in the chat, but if anyone would like to unmute and ask their question out loud, they're welcome to.
I would.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I wanted some clarification on where that 15% amount that we can request comes from. It looked like that was coming from the column of the most recently completed fiscal year, which would have been last season during the pandemic. And the expenses there were half of what a normal season would be. So that's really going to take a bite out of a lot of the funding requests and, you know, the amounts that we can request. Has that been considered?
Yes, we did. We definitely did consider that. And that was part of what we were discussing when we were having the grant feedback sessions. And overall, it looked like everyone was comfortable with going with the most recently completed fiscal year, that things were, you know, looking like they were, you know, in a large part, moving back to pre-pandemic levels.
But that's my point. We're basing the amount that we can request on the pandemic level, not the year that we're in now, or a typical year. That's
Right.
my concern. Because I think our budget that year, just off the top of my head, was like in the 70,000 range, whereas now it's 170,000. So big difference.
Okay. Okay, thank you for raising that, Susan. And I think that we will look really closely and analyze that. If needed, we will come up with a solution if that looks like it's going to be impacting. It's hard for us to tell until we actually see what your budgets are coming in. But I really appreciate your calling that out as a potential issue, and I'm going to flag that.
Because I'm sure that's not going to be just us. It's going to be all the performing arts groups.
Thank you for saying that, Susan. I hadn't thought about that yet, but I just pulled up our treasurer's report from last year, and the budget is 50% of what it is this year. And we're tracking on track to our current budget. So yeah, that's a 50% drop. And last year we were able to use the prior couple of years, I think. We were able to pick and choose which one we used to submit. That did make a difference. So that's a fantastic question. Thanks so much for considering it.
Yes, for us too. We obviously didn't have performances, so our budget went way down in expenses. Thank you.
Okay, was there anything else that that anyone wanted to talk about before we end the meeting? Yes, Joanne.
I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you. This is great. Very helpful. Thank you.
I do have one request. If we're contemplating how we're going to handle audience mask requirements, vaccine requirements now that things are shifting. If anybody is also thinking about that and has some ideas or wants to bounce off ideas, if they could contact me at manager@restonchorale.org. I'd love to get your input.
I just have a thought for you, and that would be to see what either, I'm not sure where you all perform, but like we perform in Fairfax County Public Schools, so we obviously go by all those requirements and spacing and masking and all of those things. But I would bet that Fairfax Choral Society and the other ones, they might be good resources. But even the county school system would be a good one because it's so big.
Yeah, we had a plan in place, and of course with the lifting and the changing CDC guidelines, we're back at reviewing the procedures and the requirements. So, but thank you for that suggestion. All right, thank you.
Have a great day.
All right, bye
Thank
now.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.